Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. He said that fool, you weren't cool. He took a book to your school. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Don't get shocked if you get mocked. It's what you find when you use your mind. Don't you sweat it, look 'em in the eye. Don't regret it, hold your head high. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Try to show some tenderness, even when they're playing chess. You think it's dumb to be smart, but that's the way you make art. So
Hi, I'm James Eade. Welcome to Change Your Mind. I live in the divided states of America, and I want to talk about how we become unified again. And unity does not imply uniformity. We do not have to dress alike, look alike, sound alike. What we need to be is tolerant of other people's views, other people's way of being. And how do we do that? Because many times we catch ourselves trying to change other people's minds, but it's really an inside job. How do we change our minds? Instead of trying to change other people, the answer might be to change ourselves. And so today we have a topic of surrender. Now, I think of surrender as something you do at the wrong end of a bayonet. It's just not something that I was brought up to do. I remember being told no retreat, no surrender. But I have a guest today that's going to tell me about surrender. And, I'm still not there, but maybe she can convince me that surrender is a good thing. Vivekadevi, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hello, great soul. So good to be with you. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And this topic of surrender, I brought you on because I've heard you talk about it before, and I wanted to know, like in my life, I was taught, that surrender was a bad thing. And I've heard you speak about surrender as a good thing. And I'm still trying to get there. And so I was wondering if you could help me along. Like how can surrender possibly be a good thing?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with I was trained the same way, it sounds like, as you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I appreciate that, image of it, the wrong end of a bayonet. Right. I really appreciate that because I remember as a child, one of my favorite phrases was where there's a will, there's a way. And I just, I utilize that a lot in my life.
Yes.
And it got me many positive places.
Right.
But what happened for me, because I have a background in recovery of addiction, drug and alcohol addiction, right? And so, but before that happened in my life, I was willing myself forward in positive ways. But at the same time, I was contending with a difficulty in my family home life that was impacting me. It was impacting me, and it led me toward the direction I never actually wanted to go, which was using drugs, primarily marijuana, but not limited to that, and later alcohol as a teenager to cope with the pain of my home life. And what happened for me, it turns out I'm predisposed physiologically to addiction. So by going down that road, I became dependent upon the substance. So what first was helping me cope, right, navigate and still strong willpower, heading positive, using this to deal with the pain, brought consequences into my life. Number one consequence was dependence. I mean, all of a sudden, whether I had pain or not, I needed a substance. And that was not in my game plan. Right?
Wow, you went from 0 to 60 in no time.
Okay, too fast?
No, that was deep.
Okay.
Because you can see over my head a book called Freedom
Right.
that I wrote. It was about my story of addiction and recovery.
Yes.
So you're hitting topics that are very close to my heart. And I'm very proud of you and grateful to you for sharing that was part of your upbringing as well. Because we find them as coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, if you will. And at first they help.
They do.
And then You
Yeah.
know, we often say, there's fun, and then there's fun with problems, and then there's just
Right.
problems.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so once I was in the problem place,
Right.
right, I kept trying to reset my life. I kept trying to reset it. And at a certain moment, and for me personally, it felt like a moment of grace. I had the power to do that. So I could stop. I kept trying to stop, and then a few days in, I'd feel like, well, maybe I don't have a problem, which is classic denial, right? Like
Right.
I'm in addiction world, that's classic. I didn't know
Sure.
it.
No, of
I
course not. Yeah.
4 days in and think, well, maybe I'm making too big a thing of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm good. You
Yeah.
know, I'd start again and feel like, oh, then for several days I'd need to be doing it. So, anyways, at a certain point, the moment of grace appeared, the window of opportunity appeared. I'll also say this because it's true. I had a dream that I considered to be a spiritual dream. I didn't name it as that at the time, but in my dream, that all these things lined up in such a way that the message I was given in the dream is that there is a small window in which you can change the course of your life. And if you do it, you will succeed. And if you don't, that window will close and not reopen. And for this lifetime, now I didn't have any thoughts, my program I teach is yoga and the 12 steps. I had no thoughts of other lifetimes or anything like that. But somehow I knew for certain that I had a small window of time in which I knew what it was related to also. The dream itself didn't have those details, but the message, I woke up, I wrote it out, and I reached out to a therapist for some support. Anyway, different things happened and a moment of opportunity opened and I jumped, right? And what I did then is set up my life. There were some opportunities to set up my lifestyle and my life in a really positive way. And I did. I set it all up, right? And in my mind, I thought, well, I'm going to stop for a year. So I didn't think I was addicted. I didn't even know anything about that. I just thought it's a dependence, it's a habit. I'm in this habit. I have to change the habit. So I'll do it for a year. And somehow, and I consider this intuitive wisdom, I recognize, well, because marijuana was my number one issue. If I stop this, I should stop everything. I shouldn't drink either. Because I knew, like, well, as soon as I
Yeah.
drink,
Yeah.
then I want to go to the other. So I stopped everything and changed my lifestyle. It was very positive. First few months, fantastic. This is great. I'm on the right track. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
Right. It just had to be the right
Nothing
time.
but positive reinforcement.
Right.
Yeah.
On, upward,
Yeah.
onward and upward.
Yes.
All that is ahead of me is success. And then about 3 months in, I hit depression.
Mm.
And I hit a reality that I did not have, that the enthusiasm of the newness of my life and all the positive things I put into place were not enough to counter within me. What I came to understand was addiction. I didn't know that, right? So 3 months in, I start feeling the pull to, life is overwhelming, and it was really something. So I ultimately went back to the therapy, and I worked with her. Yeah. Anyways, 7 more months in, I tried different things in terms of support. Nothing was helping me.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, yeah. So and my brother, I had an older brother who really, he didn't follow the 12 steps, but he believed in them. And he thought, and again, I feel like it's divine grace. He thought for sure they could help me. But I was like, 12 steps?
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Right.
Anyway, he kept trying to invite me to meetings and things. I wouldn't go. I'd say, you go. I was a nurse assistant at the time. I'd been trained as that in high school. So I worked full time, and my life was incredibly narrow. I worked full time and went home and waited for the next day and waited to feel better. And every day I felt worse. And I
Wow,
thought,
this is intense listening to you talk about this because depression is the story of many addicts,
True.
and many that is often what drives them to um, start taking the substance of their choice again,
Yes.
and because depression is awful,
Yeah.
and the the answer, though, what we think of as the answer, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, or in
Yeah.
both of our cases, that was what we were doing mostly,
Yeah.
and it turns out that that's a very short-term
Yeah.
fix,
Exactly.
and the problems only get worse. The
Exactly.
depression deepens.
Right. Right. Well, what you're reminding me of, Jim, is what I then later learned about in terms of physiology, right? Is that dopamine suppression, down regulation. So if I'm ingesting things that will stimulate dopamine, right? My body, in wisdom, will say this is too much, right?
Hmm.
I'm not. The body isn't created to have that much, right? So it down regulates and it starts to suppress, right, the receptivity to it. Okay,
Yeah.
now take the substance away. I've got down regulated dopamine. So
Yes.
even normal life doesn't feel good,
Right.
right? And
Yes.
so,
And
yeah, so now
it's so
I'm,
funny because as you're saying this, because I
yeah,
can remember when I wasn't trying to be happy, I was trying to be ecstatic.
ex-
I was trying to be, I wanted to achieve ecstasy on a
yeah,
daily basis.
yeah,
It's not sustainable. You can't do it.
yeah,
And
not
so,
with substances. That's
yeah,
right.
and so you ingest more and more, and it doesn't work eventually. But you're just setting yourself up for failure because of what
Totally.
you just exactly described. It's like
Not
the
knowing it.
body will shut down,
It will.
and as you told us, it's like that kind of like try to ramp it up is only going to make the body go no, no, no.
Exactly. That's right. And this is the thing, as you said, depression or pain in other ways, right? So
Hmm.
that's the thing, is I was treating it by trying to overload my system
Yes,
with, this uplifting
and it's because we
substance.
didn't know better.
I totally didn't know better.
Yeah,
And yeah, and then not everybody who does that becomes addicted.
exactly.
So,
Right.
right? Um, I I did. And so 10 months in, close to 10 months in, my brother went to this big not that, sorry, 12-step speaker. And he wanted me to go. And I said, no, thanks. You go talk to me about it. And he met a young woman who was about my age. And there's hundreds of people there.
Hmm.
And at the break time, he ran up to her and he started talking to her. And he said, my sister, I was 20. And at this point, I think I just turned 21.
Hmm.
And he said, she doesn't know anybody. She's not drinking. She's not using drugs of any kind, but no one her age that she knows, right, is that. And
Right.
she's so, I wish she had someone like you to talk to. And as they're talking, she's like, what's her name? And she said, oh, I know Vivekadevi. Yeah, I run the kitchen in the hospital where she works. My brother's like, what? He said, I see her every day. I
Oh
see
my
her every
goodness.
day. Yeah. Because you're kidding. She goes, oh, I'll be so happy to talk to her. She had 3 years recovery at that time. And so the
How
next, right?
crazy is that? That's just
Exactly.
it's serendipity. It just had to be. It was meant to be.
It
Is
was
the only
meant
thing
to
I can
be.
see. Yeah.
It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so next day I go into work, right? And I was just so reserved. And, I go in and because I was depressed, I was having such a hard time, right?
Sure.
My whole outward personality had really gone to the wayside.
It completely changed. I bet. Yeah.
It really had.
Yeah.
It really had. And so I loved the work I was doing. So that was a life saving.
Sure.
So I went in to get the breakfast trays, and there she is. Hey, guess who I met last night? I'm like, I have no idea. Well, we never really even talked that much before,
Right.
except for what's the breakfast or whatever.
Yeah.
And she said, I met your brother. I was at that meeting.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, what? Well, my brain's trying to process it all.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm sober, right?
Uh-huh.
And she had a light in her eyes. Yeah, she was radiant. And first off, she said it out loud, which I was like, wow, you're kind of announcing that freely
Right.
here.
Whoa.
Greg, what are you doing?
Yes, yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But I'm happy to talk to you about that
Uh-huh.
anytime. Right. And I said, okay. And so she started every break then. She
Right.
talked to me and told me her whole story. And I thought, wow. And her story seemed way more harrowing than mine. And
Right.
right. I was
We
like,
get
gosh,
into that comparison, but we
right,
get over that too.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and yet it's something later I found in 12-step recovery, which was this remarkable, truly remarkable reality was people would share their experience of getting to a point in their story where it was all about problems, right? First, it's how did you say it again? Remind me. It's fun with problems, and then it's problems, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So at that point in the story, which was always heartbreaking, and just like it would be silence in the room, listening to someone talk about in such realness that moment. And in my mind, I'd always feel like, well, no one can recover from that. I mean, at that point, you can't turn it around.
Right.
Right? You're at the other end of the bayonet. No way can you do anything. And they'd say yes and no. Yeah. They would surrender to the truth that they couldn't. They couldn't. But if they said, I give up, this way isn't working. I've done everything I can, and it's problems, problems, problems.
And
Which is what, go ahead.
what you were starting with was if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
And now you're saying the way is no will.
Right. Right. And I would be with them at that moment in the story and feel like the difference in our stories, which is that I was sober, right? But I wasn't free.
Right.
I wasn't free. No way was I free. I had applied willpower I had put everything in place that should have brought me freedom, but I didn't know I was dealing with addiction. And changing my outer world was not enough to transform that, right? So when they were saying, no matter what I did, problem, 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 I related to that. It's like, what is the problem, right? And the message they carried to me was a spiritual message.
And let me just
Go
stop you
ahead.
there. You're
Right.
saying that when you were actually actively ingesting foreign substances, there was you're having problems. But
Yeah.
even when you stopped doing that,
Yes,
you still face problems.
I did.
And you didn't know where to turn.
I really didn't. It didn't make any sense. I
Right.
mean, how can I be an addict? I'm not using anything.
Right.
How does that make me an addict?
Yeah.
Right? How can I be an alcoholic?
I don't have a brown paper bag, and I'm not living under the
right?
the
I
bridge
was
sometimes.
right. And I was of an age where a lot of people in my
Young.
life didn't think that was true either.
Right.
But no one in the meetings suspected I wasn't. They were, they could tell. I think
Isn't that
suffering
something?
recognizes suffering. Right?
I think you hit on something very profound there. And if you haven't been there, you don't recognize it.
You just don't. And everyone else knew me as this person who was dynamic and had such willpower and had done so many positive things. I had overcome so many things in my life. Like that was the image everyone had. And I remembered it.
Yes.
But I wasn't connected to it.
Correct.
I wasn't.
The other thing is that people think that if you're an addict, that means you have no willpower.
That's right.
But it was the opposite for both
the
of us.
opposite, right?
We had tremendous willpower.
Tremendous willpower. Yeah, I still do.
But we still found ourselves trapped.
Totally. And I couldn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it.
Exactly.
I felt like I didn't really have my arms crossed, but it was like that. It was like my arms were crossed and I was leaning back and going, you know, I don't get this at all, right? I
I
don't.
might have even had one arm out.
Exactly. I mean, I was desperate.
Yes.
I was desperate.
And
And
sometimes
that
that's what it
brought me
takes.
to a place of willingness, right?
Isn't that
And
interesting?
clearly those people telling their story, right? So they get to that moment where I think, wow, you know, gosh, I thought I had problems.
And they're saying it out loud.
Yeah, they're saying it out loud. No shame.
No shame. Wasn't
No
that
shame.
beautiful?
Oh, amazing. No
And-
embarrassment.
yeah.
Like this is a condition, right? This is nothing to be embarrassed about, right? It's a physiological reality.
It's
Body, of the mind, right? Like it
Right.
happens.
Right.
Right. And there's a spiritual solution. And the very powerful thing to me in 12 steps was doesn't matter how you define it. I was like, what? Doesn't matter how I define it. Nope. Right. And I remember there was a day with this young woman who'd been helping me before it was what got me into the meetings, is that she was talking. I had a really horrible night one night, right? Where I just was so driven to deal with this depression and deal, you know, in the old way, right? I resisted all night long, but by the next day I was so exhausted. And I came to work and she saw me and she said, "You look terrible." And I was like, oh, you know, I had a hard night.
Yeah,
And I just said that, right? Thinking she would know exactly what I meant, right? Assuming she had these too, right?
All right.
So I did. And she said, "What do you mean?" And so I told her, I said, "Well, I just all night long, I kept feeling like I wanted to go back to the substances to feel better. Right?
Yes.
And I didn't, but I'm exhausted. I couldn't sleep." And she froze in her steps. And I feel like she got ashen in her color. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I just said that to her, like, "Why do you look like that?" Like, and she got quiet and leaned forward and she said, "It sounds like you were in the compulsion." I go, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you know, the compulsion, which is what addiction is about, to use." I go, "Yeah, I lived in it." And what was the big surprise? I said, aren't you?" And then she said, "No, right? No, that's been gone for years."
Wow.
I go, "What do you mean it's been gone for years?" She said, "Well, it was lifted." I go, "How was it lifted?" "Spiritually, right? Higher power lifted it." I believed I had a concept of God, right? I had so much shame that that relationship was injured on my part because I felt so terrible about myself, right?
Right.
But even still, I was like, "What are you talking about?" You know, higher power, God, you know. She said, and then she told me, and she said, "Yeah, that's true of everyone in 12 steps who has recovery. Yeah, it's lifted, it's taken away. Now it's dependent upon spiritual principles and living, you know, the steps." But I still couldn't believe it because I'd been living in compulsion daily for 10 months.
Right.
Right. So, I mean,
And you don't think that there's some easy answer like that?
no way.
Yeah.
And it just lifted mysteriously,
Yeah.
suddenly evaporates,
Yeah.
and you're free. You're
And
just
there's
free.
a bridge you want to sell me next. Yeah, come
Right,
on.
exactly. I know, but I could see she was. I could see she was.
Yeah,
And
right.
so, and I thought, okay, I don't understand this. And she said, "Well, the 12 steps they're a spiritual path, right? And step one is you admit you're powerless. You can't do it. You can't remove the compulsion. You can't make it go away, even if you're sober. Even if I'm sober, I can't make that go away.
That
Not
was
if I
my
have it."
experience. And
Wow.
so now, is this when you talk about surrender?
Yeah. Right. And so
I'm
she's, yeah,
getting it.
exactly.
You're
Yeah.
starting to get, you're getting through to me. This
Okay.
is when your willpower that can't do it.
Can't do it.
Even though you've done everything, you've eliminated all these things.
Yes.
But you're still stuck. You're still trapped. You still
Yeah.
feel horrible.
Yes.
Your life is suffering and pain.
Yes.
And you can't figure out why.
Yes.
And you don't know what to do. And
Right.
you're saying that's the time that you just give up.
Yeah.
Give up?
Right.
Is that right?
Right. It's interesting. It's the magic moment. And the thing I've been reminded of many times, it's the first step. It's not the last one. The old idea, if I give up, it's over.
Right.
If I give up, it's over. Right? I've lost the battle. I've
Exactly.
lost it.
Right.
Right? And
I'm
that's
the
the thing.
loser.
I'm
Yeah.
a loser. Right? And so to me, I'd been fighting. Ah,
Knuckles are just so white.
totally, right? And she saw me after a rough battle.
Right.
And she's like,
Oh,
what's wrong? Like,
yeah.
you look terrible. Yeah, I'd been fighting all night long.
Right.
And I was like, you're not fighting? She's like, no, I'm not fighting. I'm like,
Isn't
okay,
it?
how did you win this battle?
Yeah, right. That's how we think of it. Right. It has to be a winner and
It's
loser.
impossible. How can you win without fighting?
Yes.
Yeah. And so she said, you admit that you're powerless, right? And your life is unmanageable. It's not, I mean, no kidding. I mean, I could admit that, but I couldn't understand how that was a path to freedom, right? Well, and so there's an opening that happens in that surrender. There's an opening that isn't, I'm throwing in the towel.
Right.
My life is over. The battle's lost. No. No, I just can't do it. I need support. And it's like, oh, I've been out on the battlefield by myself.
Right.
Okay, well, I didn't know I could have help.
There was this Beatles song that said, I never needed help in any way. And I lived that.
Didn't.
I lived that song.
Me too.
And then it is, you find out different. You do need help.
Yeah.
And asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
Right. And I totally thought it was.
I totally did too.
I totally did. I mean, I just was like, yeah. And that's the grace that I have found, truly the gift of addiction. I would never have called it that, didn't at the time, but have come to acknowledge it as that. Is it expanded my world and my life and my experience beyond words, because suddenly I became open and receptive to a team.
Wow.
That could help me. Yeah.
What a transformation.
Complete transformation. And it was uncomfortable. Right? I mean, I people would come and they'd be supportive, and I was used to doing it on my own.
Yeah.
Right? I was used to that. But I had surrendered that much. I surrendered enough, is what I'll say, to listen. I surrendered enough to listen.
That's amazing. But you know, what you're talking about reminds me of, you know, I hope people remember record players, but you know, I had this needle in an old groove.
Yeah.
And it was like playing awful music for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I could just pick it up and move it.
Right.
And to a new groove. But when we established that new groove, just what you're talking about, it wasn't comfortable. It's scratchy. It doesn't sound that great, you know.
Yeah,
and it's like,
right.
You know.
What is this?
But once you keep doing it, you keep picking the needle up, moving it over, and the music gets sweeter and sweeter.
True, and it's so much sweeter.
And you have a team, and this is like a foreign concept to me when I was younger.
Totally.
I mean, I always played sports. I was on a team. You know, that part was sure, but you know, for my life, you know, you're supposed to be self-sufficient, Jim.
Yeah, that's success.
Yeah.
Right. That's and you know, it's so interesting because to have a team that I actually rely on, that very different. Because, you know, again, even on teams, it's easier to be the captain.
Absolutely. Point guard, quarterback.
I was good at that. Right? It was a natural ability.
You go there.
Right. I love supporting others. I mean, I love it. So, but in no way
I'm so embarrassed. You just nailed me.
Right? Yeah. So it's like I was on teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was the captain.
Right.
It seemed like I was in community. Right.
Uh-huh.
It seemed like it. Yeah, but I wasn't relying on anyone.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I wasn't. I wasn't. And so
Fascinating.
now I'm entering into this new community. And one of the things I love about it is how imperfect it is. Like, oh,
Tell me that again. You
yeah,
love that it's imperfect.
I love that it's imperfect. So part of what I've seen is the power of sincerity and, the power of the spiritual principles within those 12 steps, right? So here's this young woman saying to me, yeah, your higher power can be any concept you want. That seemed, way out of the box to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it did reassure me that they're not trying, no one's going to impose a higher power on you.
Right.
Like, oh, no.
Right.
And I remember saying something to the effect, it could be a leaf. Sure. It could be a rock, a cloud. Sure. Now, of course, Native American tradition, I want to say, there's a great reference for the divine in nature, right? I don't think I even realized what I was saying when
Father
I said
Sky,
it.
Mother Earth, yes.
Yeah. But she said, it's yours. As long as you have found something you can believe is greater than you, right? So you're not battling on your own out there.
And
whatever that is.
For me, the realization was whatever it is, it's not me.
Whatever it is, it's not me. That's what she was saying. It's pretty that simple. And I thought, how can that work? Right? How's that possible? And then what I saw, because there's such a strong orientation in 12 steps of community and we, and having a guide of some kind. But when the imperfection, they don't have to be perfect.
Right.
And no one in the community has to be perfect.
And you don't expect perfection.
Right. I mean, guess who else doesn't have to be perfect?
Yourself. Right.
Yeah.
And you can show compassion to yourself. This is a gift I never knew I could give myself.
Yeah.
And being compassionate towards yourself, like I used to say, I had to be better, faster, stronger, and whatever I achieved, it wasn't good enough because I could have done it better.
Right.
And, now when I do something that's pretty good, and people thank me or something like that, I can accept it. Yeah. I can say, well, if it worked, great, I'm happy. Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be the optimal solution.
At all.
Which was such a trap for me. It was trying to optimize everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I know for me, there was such a feeling of unworthiness for me, right?
Yeah, you never could succeed. You can never meet your own standards.
Right. And to find out that my worth is not outside myself. Now, I'm sure I could have believed in that concept. I mean, I don't think that would have been foreign to me, but apply it to me. Mm-hmm. That was kind of like I could carry that for others.
Right.
Easily I could carry it for others.
Of course.
But to really come to understand, and I needed to come to understand, circumstance brought me there, because circumstance brought me to that which in my mind defined me as a loser.
Right.
And then, I entered a community.
No matter how many successes you had, no matter how many things you could point to that you accomplished.
No.
You were still not meeting your own internal standards. Therefore, you were a loser.
Yeah. And I would have always, because my standards were impossible.
Right.
I didn't think they were.
I totally relate to that. But get me back to the surrender moment.
Okay. So the surrender moment, the realization when she's telling me that it was lifted and she's free and she didn't do it.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. I mean, so I said, tell me more, right? Tell me more. And she said, well, this is part of being in a 12-step community, and you admit you can't do it. And then suddenly you're joined on the battlefield. Step 2. You're joined on the battlefield. like really pretty cool. But everyone, she said, does feel that way. They do feel initially like a complete loser. And sadly, in the external world, because most people don't understand addiction, um, that's, depending on how messy the life is, how many problems there are, you can be getting that feedback.
Sure.
Right. And so she said it's natural to feel that way, to feel like now you've lost and you're throwing in the towel, but you're just beginning. Your whole life has just begun. It's just begun. And what I've seen in the principle of surrender is how it reoccurs in life over and over again, and what a blessing it is over and over again. So generally speaking, it appears when there's a reality I can't change, that I don't like. I mean, why else am I trying to change it? Right? So maybe I'm trying to prevent a relationship from ending. Maybe someone's sick and I don't want them to die. Maybe I have a health issue and I want to change it, right? A job loss, like things happen, and they can happen. And no amount of my willpower and all the skills I've collected along the way, including recovery and lots of great teams, but there are certain realities, and I know it. I know the moment, like I recognize it because I've done it enough. And I go, oh, surrender again. Surrender.
I totally can. I just wanted to say that you're absolutely correct from my experience, in that I can see myself over and over again where I used to fight.
Yeah, right.
Because I didn't like it, so I wanted to fight it.
Yeah.
And I had a track record of success, so I was geared up. I could feel myself gearing up, and then saying, "Whoa, this is not worth doing this to myself again."
Mm-mm.
The cost to me is much greater than any possible benefit of winning this argument or this whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, even if I can change it,
That's right.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
That I pay. And when I have that sense of surrender, giving up the fight, it's like, whoa, that is a feeling that's almost joyful. It's like, it's like so beneficial to me.
So beneficial.
That I can do it. Go from tense to calm.
Yes.
Tense.
That's it. That's it exactly, Jim. That's it. And the what I'm feeling and relating to, and what you're sharing, is that when surrender is called for, because it isn't always called for, actually, where there's a will, there's a way. I'm full of dynamic energy and willpower. I apply it in my life a lot. I'm glad I do, and it's appropriate a lot, right? But there are times when it's not. And I've gotten better and better, faster and faster at recognizing the signs, and it has to do with tension. Because when it's the right thing, it feels good. It feels, I feel free. I'm in freedom. I'm doing the right thing. I'm applying my willpower appropriately. I'm taking right action. I'm whatever those things are, living by spiritual principles and the right. Yes. But when I'm not supposed to be, when this isn't mine, which brings me to the serenity prayer. It's okay to share that, or?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom
to
know the difference. So when it is something that I cannot change, and it's not a moment to, the courage to change the things I can, it's not a moment for that.
Right.
I can't actually change it.
And the wisdom to know which one.
Wisdom to know it.
Yeah.
And over time, sooner and sooner, I recognize, I'm trying to change something. I'm trying to affect something. I'm like, bring on the courage, right? And my higher power is like, no. I didn't know it, but I'm on the battlefield again by myself.
I think you're talking about me. I know you're talking about yourself.
It's universal.
Yeah.
That's what I love. It's so universal, this human journey, right? It's just, I mean,
But
and that's a joy.
it's like, I got to have the courage to change the things I can. I can change this. I got to summon the courage.
Courage,
I'm
courage,
getting
courage.
tense. I'm getting all wound up.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Maybe one of those
relax.
things you don't have to change. You just
At
have
all.
to accept.
And you know, I just have so many moments of that surprise, right? When I'm like, what? This is, I'm supposed to be surrendering, right? And it's like, and I go, oh, and you really described it beautifully. The tension that's created when I wandered out onto the battlefield by myself, unknowingly.
Right.
It's, you
Right.
know, unknowingly. It's hard to know. And
You didn't
that's,
articulate it that way. Right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's part of spiritual practice for me, is the practice of listening for guidance.
Wow.
Right? Listen for guidance.
And
So
is that
that
an act of surrender as well?
they go together. It's like, yes, there's a humility in that, right? Which is, let me call on a source greater than myself, who's got the master plan and who can see the whole battlefield,
Right.
who can see everything, and will let me know, yeah, don't go there. There's no need for it. And, you know, in my conscious mind is like, but I could probably help.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
maybe
not
it's
yours
your
to
place.
do.
That's, you know, one of the rituals that I do every morning now, and it's a recent ad. Haven't done this for too long. Is I ask and give thanks for being reminded to do not what is not mine to do.
That's it. That's it.
And I just added it recently because it was one of those things I am still working on actively.
Right.
And I need to be reminded every day.
Yes.
There's
And
so
that
many
humility,
that are not mine to do.
Yes.
Even though I think I could do them, and even though I think I could make them better or
And you might.
improve, you know, they're not mine to do.
They're not, right.
And
right.
this
And
is so freeing.
It's so freeing again.
Yeah.
Right. And so beginning to have a sensitivity toward that energy.
Right.
Right. Is that there's a serenity with the things I cannot change.
And that
when I'm listening.
That wisdom that you talked about in that prayer, that can be built up. It's your discretion gets better over time. I have noticed this in me anyways.
Yes.
Is that when I started out trying to do these things, I wasn't very good at it.
No, I wasn't either. I mean, I had such an old way of doing it. That's why I needed a guide. I needed a mentor. I really did. I remember in college, you know, I had taken on way too many courses.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think so. Right.
Oh, no, of course
way
not.
Too many. I'm going to power through.
Right.
And they were stressing me out. Right. And I actually called my husband. We were dating at that time. You know, he doesn't have a background in addiction. And so he was saying, oh, right, here's what I did. And I loved it. Right. Which is basically power through. He kind of gave me the talk. You can do it. You can do it. I loved it. So I get off the phone. I go over to my mentor's house, right, with the good news, like, you know, check in. And I'm basically going to say, like, that's what she said. I always remember she was washing dishes. I'm sitting at the table with a cup of coffee with her backs to me. She's listening to me. And I told her I was really having a hard time. I had all these classes and felt like too much. But then I talked to James and here's what he said. And she's like, and then she turned and looked at me and she said, what do you think the result would be if this is actually too much for you? What do you think would happen? And I was like, she goes, what do you think the risk is? And I was like, and then she said, you're alcoholic and addict. And if you don't listen to the truth of your life, and you power through something, it's not good for you to power through. You could end up drunk in a ditch. You could die. And I mean, talk about a sober conversation. And I was just, I leaned back in my chair. She said, Jim isn't.
Right.
He could do it. And, you know, there would be a cost, which he told me there was a cost. It'd wore him out, whatever. But he could shake it off. That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
I wanted to shake it off. Right.
Yeah.
And she said, You need to live differently to protect your sobriety.
How smart is that? That
I
is so
know.
wise.
Yeah. It's so wise. And I'll tell you, I was so mad. I knew it was true. I didn't want to hear that at
Right.
all. Right.
I wanted to
And
power
she,
through.
right? She knew I was mad. I didn't say anything. She knew I was so mad. And then she said, something to think about, and
Mhm.
turned away and went back to washing dishes while I sat there. Something to think about. And then she said, and I don't know if she was looking at me or she still had her back to me, she said, Jim is not your sponsor. He's not your
Wow.
mentor. Yeah.
Right.
And that served me and has served us throughout our whole relationship. He can't, he's such a fantastic, beautiful, wonderful partner and friend, but he can't bring me this kind of wisdom. Right? Nope. I need someone who knows that battle.
Right.
I need someone who knows that battle. And when you know that battle, you can hear it differently. Right? You can hear it differently. She's like, what are you doing on the battlefield by yourself there?
Right. And
Right?
you would have been again.
I would have been. Well, I was in that moment. That's the thing
Yeah.
of surrender, right? She was recognizing you're in a perilous situation here because you're compromising your well-being. So there's a phrase, there's an acronym, hungry, or hungry, angry, lonely, tired,
Halt.
right? HALT. That's it. Thank you. HALT. And it was a setup for that. And I was thinking I'd be fine.
Yeah.
She's like,
Or
what? How are you different than everybody else who has this battle? And ignoring HALT kills them. Why is it you think you would be impervious to that? Now, here's the truth I've seen over time too about surrender, because there are lots of people who take yoga in the 12 steps. They're not addicts, but they can learn these principles, right? Like HALT is actually a nice guideline for everyone.
sure.
You'll be healthier, more resilient, more
Right.
vibrant. Like, hey, you don't have to be battling in life.
Nicer to your spouse.
Nicer to your spouse. Like, there's lots of benefits. And I remember hearing that, like, these principles, it's a program for living, everyone could benefit from.
Right.
Right? I've seen that over time. But the difference for me that she was reminding me, your life depends on this. Others can get away with it. It's not to their, they're going to pay a cost, but not necessarily their life.
Not the
And
same
so,
cost.
not the same cost. And then, I'll kind of, if I can do it to articulate it and then flip it to say, living this way has given me, my gosh, such a vibrant, fantastic, resilient, beautiful life that, wow, then it's attractive to those who don't need it.
Yeah.
They're like, go ahead.
What I can tell you is that knowing you in this stage of your life,
Yeah.
it's very hard for me to picture you at the stage that you described.
Yeah, right.
Because you are vibrant and
Right.
you are positive.
Right.
And, when I'm around you, I pick up on that.
Yeah.
And these are the types of things that, I aspire to. And
Yeah.
I find there are days that I can pull it off, and there are
Yeah.
days that I'm not so good at it.
Sure.
And I think you've been at it a bit longer than I have.
Yeah.
And so it gives me like some sense of reassurance.
For sure.
Keep practicing,
Absolutely.
keep doing it.
Absolutely.
It gets easier.
It really does. That's what others gave me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No shame, no embarrassment. I remember someone
None.
saying to me when I learned the Serenity Prayer, they said, here's my experience with how it works. They said, serenity, it's not like one day you don't have it and one day you have it completely.
Right.
Oh, now I'm serene. Now my life is serene and I have it, right?
Yeah.
They said, it's
all done.
Yeah. Done, right? Tick that box. They said, it's more like you don't have it and then you have a little. You have like, hey, 5 minutes serenity.
Yeah.
Right? And you just take it in, right?
Yes.
And over time, you have more and more and
Right.
more and more. And, you reach a point where mostly serenity. Not always. Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah. And the goal is not to be necessarily serene all the time, but just to be more serene than you were.
At peace with myself.
And yes, and
That's the serenity.
that's a wonderful way to say it.
Yeah, at peace with myself.
Yeah.
At peace with myself and with my fellows.
And comfortable in your own skin.
Right? How miraculous is that? I mean, it's truly miraculous.
It really,
it
it's like
is.
I'm describing somebody that's not familiar to me when I'm talking about myself in those ways.
That's right.
And then I have to picture myself, no, this is the way you are now, Jim. And it's
that's it.
I have to write over the old coding.
Well, it's what you said, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, you're picking up the needle.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, right?
Thank you. Yes.
That's it.
That was the imagery that helped me realize that this is also physiological. There are new neural networks that are being built in my brain.
Absolutely. And they become, as you said, then they become these pathways, these well-worn roads, right? That, I remember early on having this image of like laying one brick at a time. And it seems so small, right? Like I at the end of a day, because the people would say to me in that community, if you're sober, it's a success. But it wasn't just the abstinence, because I'd had that before.
Right.
But what, sobriety was recovery. I mean, that's the thing, is that, yeah, if you were practicing the principles, right? And you were sober, it was a success. It seemed like such a low bar for me, but I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand addiction. It took me a long time. And I have a much better, what I'd call a healthy respect for that formidable foe.
Right.
Yeah. That I don't ever want to be battling by myself. And I don't need to. And then it turns out, oh my gosh, life is so much better with a team. Why would I want to be walking through the world by myself? Only because I thought I had to earn some sense of value, some sense of completely wrong. I mean, it's just false. It's a completely false story. It still exists out there, this idea. I mean, that.
Oh, yeah. I think we're still taught it as children.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a misunderstanding, right? It's a misunderstanding. And this is where I encounter many people, again, who don't have a background in addiction, but they have cancer they're dealing with. They have the loss of a spouse. They have difficulty at work. They have challenges in relationships. And how do I meet that with grace?
Right.
Well, the first thing is I surrender that pushing against it is not going to get me there. And so, by the time they've found their way to me, usually that's what's going on. They've pushed and pushed and pushed. And I recognize that sense of shame and embarrassment and false sense of failure.
Right.
Yeah. Like, well, it's a failure to do something that actually isn't yours to do. It's not yours to do. So, laying that down is a path of freedom. And I often, again, remind people it's just the beginning.
Right.
It's not the last thing we do. It's the first thing we do. Like, surrender. Then bring in the team. Have some source of higher power. It can be anything you want or need it to be. And if you already have a sense of that, call on it and expand it. Maybe what's happening in life is you need a bigger team. Maybe you've had a team that's worked really well up to this point. If you're struggling, it's usually an indication. That's been my
Pay attention to those signals if you're struggling.
To the tension, to the difficulty, to the exhaustion, to melancholy, to depression, like the ways in which joy has eroded. And it doesn't mean I've done anything wrong. The circumstances of my life, sometimes it's very subtly how they shift. I'm handling it, I'm managing it, I'm navigating it, and then I'm not. I don't know why I'm not. And an old idea can come in, I failed somehow because I can't do this. And just as you said, I'm better at catching that and shifting it, but even that I don't do alone. If it's come in, I seek help. I ask somebody who can give me the light again and remind me. Yeah.
Wow. I can't tell you how moving this has been for me, because, these are the things that I'm actively working on. Asking for help is still so difficult for me. And, it's like, my light's flickering,
Yeah,
but it's up to me to make it shine again. No,
right.
man, someone's got their hand out. I just have to reach out and hold it, and they can
Yeah,
help me.
truly.
Some of their energy can come to me and
Yeah,
help me.
yeah,
Why wouldn't I do that? What
right,
am I afraid of?
right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
the answer is there is nothing to be afraid of, but I've just been trained not to
That's
do it.
it. That's it. Right. I mean, it's yeah. And to, as you said earlier, have compassion for myself,
Hmm.
for the false notions that were created, the false ideas that still exist. Again, I mean, I see them out there. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
battle them.
Yeah.
It's okay. I get it. I lived in it. So
Yeah.
my
And
role
it's
is
not my job to stamp them out.
what I loved how you began today. Unity isn't that we all agree.
Right.
We don't have to all agree. Can we respect each other? Can we acknowledge each other, value each other,
Yeah.
listen to each other? Right.
And want
So
each other to be happy.
right,
Why try to
right,
hold back someone else's happiness?
exactly.
If their happiness is a different thing than my happiness, so what?
So be it.
Let them
I'm
be
just
happy.
let them be happy. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just remarkable, the inner peace, right?
Yeah.
No longer battling with myself or anyone else. I don't
See,
need to. Yeah.
I want to be serene more than I am, but I know what serenity feels like.
That's it.
That is an incredible gift.
I mean, the first 5 minutes, I was like, okay, this I want more of,
Yeah.
right?
Because I
This I
didn't know
want
it.
more.
When I was in the throes of my addiction, I didn't know it.
No, I didn't either.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was
Ooh.
right. Yeah, I
Viveka
didn't
Devi,
either.
I'm sorry, but my producer's yelling at me.
Okay, it's time to
Time,
go.
it's time for me to wrap up.
Such a
I could
joy
talk to you
being
for
with you.
hours.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Me too, great soul.
But thank you for helping me understand that surrender is not the end, but the beginning.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, what a wonderful job you did today. Thanks again
Thank
for
you so
being my
much.
guest. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't tell you how important that conversation was to me, and it's going to make me try to be better today. And I'm going to live up to oh, no, wait, I'm going down the wrong track. Okay. I'm just going to accept the way I am today and try to be the best me I can be as often as I can be. And I'm going to ask for help so that I can do that. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Change Your Mind. And the Roman god Janus in my lower left-hand corner is going to be replaced by a more modern version, because we can change our mind.